Dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, I would like to welcome you to this webinar on inclusive mobility. Before we start, I would like to take you through some technical issues. Can we go to the you to through some next slide, please. I hope you to set group participants, we will not use the hands function, so only the Q&A box will be used. Live streaming will also be available through the YouTube channel meant for all participants. A sign language interpretation during the webinar. To activate the live captioning, you should click on the button mentioning CC live transcript at the bottom of your screen. It should be next to the button chat. Also change the settings. You can change furthermore. There is also the possibility for full page captioning using the link. Please use the chat and my colleagues will help you. I get the message that that the sound is not very good, so I'll try to reconnect. Just give me 1 second, please. Let's try again. Can you hear me now?
It seems to be working better. I hear you better.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope for the others as well. I'm very sorry for the technical issues.
Yeah, it's much better now.
Okay. Should I repeat?
Yes, maybe let's go back quickly to the previous slide.
The previous one. Okay. Yes, so the rules of the webinar, we will keep microphones off for all participants and also for the speakers when you are not speaking. Cameras will be turned on only by the speakers and for sign language interpretation. And we will use the Q&A box for participants to share your questions. We will not use the hands function, the raising hands function, because we are with so many participants in the room that it's not possible to use that. I would also like to inform you that we will be live streaming this webinar, which will be put on the YouTube Support Center for Inclusive Higher Education link that you can see here. And also the recordings will be placed on the website after finishing this webinar. Next one, please, Dominique. Okay, so as this webinar touches upon inclusive mobility, especially for disabled students, we wanted to offer this webinar as well in a very inclusive way, making it accessible for all participants. Therefore, we have foreseen live captioning and sign language interpretation during the webinar. To activate the live captioning, you should click on the button mentioning CC live transcript on the bottom of your screen. It's probably next to the Q&A or to the chat button. If you click on this button, you will also see some settings where you can change the size and color to adapt to your needs and preferences. Furthermore, there is also the possibility for full page captioning using the link mentioned in the chat. If you choose this option, a new separate window will open. For participants who want to make use of the sign interpretation, you can move your mouse over the picture of the sign interpreter. Please use then the button with 3 dots and pin the video of the sign language interpretation. If you would have any further questions or experience any difficulties, please use the chat and my colleagues will help you. Now, let's move to the content part of this webinar. I'm extremely happy to welcome you all. We have more than 600 participants registered for this event, which is much higher than above and much higher than our initial expectations. However, it does give us a very strong signal. It shows that the topic we are dealing with in the EPFIME project is extremely important, and a lot of people working at international, national, regional, and institutional level, as well as students, are very much interested in learning more about the outcomes of our research. The EPFIME project is a cooperation of the Flemish Ministry of Education and Training, who acts as a coordinator, together with its partners, CIHO, the Centre for Inclusive Higher Education in Flanders, the Irish University Association, AHED, the Association for Higher Education, Access and Disability in Ireland, and finally, but not least, the Erasmus Student Network. From the side of Flanders, inclusion is high on our policy agenda, and for the moment, we are coordinating 2 European projects on this topic. In 2019, we started the EPFIME project, in which we want to enhance a thought-out policy and framework on inclusive mobility across Europe. This project is specifically focused on students with disabilities. We examine in depth the needs and expectations on inclusive mobility of national authorities, students with disabilities, and higher education institutions across Europe. We have now finished the first phase of the project, and we are ready to share with you the research report and booklet of policy recommendations and good practices. The second phase will consist of creating a self-assessment tool for higher education institutions, national agencies and ministries, guidelines for higher education institutions, and an online platform on inclusive mobility. These deliverables will be presented in spring 2021. Next to the EPFIME project, we started this year our second project, PLA for SIMP, focusing on peer learning activities and resources for social inclusion in mobility programs. Compared to EPFIME, the new project has a broader scope, taking into account all students from underrepresented groups. A number of countries within the EHEA has been selected to join us in 2 peer learning activities, of which one already took place in September. A second one will be organized in spring 2021. And next to these PLAs, we will further work on the online platform on inclusive mobility and make the guidelines of EPFIME more broad. We will also design a communication package for addressing students from underrepresented groups. Now, let us go back to the EPFIME project and this webinar. After the presentation of the research results, we have a panel ready for you. They will reflect on the research and booklet we will present and share their thoughts from different points of view. Let me first introduce myself. I am Magali Sunen. I have more than 20 years experience in internationalization in higher education, first on institutional level within Ghent University, after that within the Erasmus Plus National Agency in Flanders, and finally at national policy level within the ministry where I still work today. I'm the coordinator of this and many other European projects for the moment. And next to this, I also represent Belgian Flemish community in the Bologna follow-up group and the ASAM process. Next to me, you see the picture of Elena Tegowska. She's team leader higher education at the European Commission and the Director General Education and Culture. She's replacing today Harpa Sif Anarsdottir, who is unfortunately ill, and we are very happy that the Commission on such short notice could replace Harpa. We wish her a good recovery, and we are very happy that Elena can join us today. We are also very privileged to have with us Els Titica, Counselor on Higher Education, Internationalization and Europe at the Cabinet of the Vice Prime Minister Ben Weitz, responsible for education, sports, animal welfare and Flemish periphery of the Flemish government. Previously, Els worked at the Flemish Inter-University Council, VLIR, as policy officer. She has an education background in political sciences, data protection and public finance. To add also at least some gender balance in our panel, we have Dominique Montagnese. He's an expert on inclusive mobility for CIHO. He has been working with international mobility programs for more than 10 years and with social inclusion in mobility for more than 6 years. He is the initiator of several projects linking inclusion and Erasmus Plus mobilities, such as Mapability, MAPT, and the Inclusive Mobility Alliance, which he currently chairs. Dominique contributes to the current development of the platform inclusivemobility.eu, which will be the platform for inclusive mobility within the European higher education area. And last but certainly not least, we have Valerie van Hees joining us. She's the coordinator of the Support Center for Inclusive Higher Education in Flanders, a cooperation between the Flemish government and the Flemish University Associations. I'm very proud to have her next to me as project manager of the EPFIME project. She's doing a marvelous job building on over 20 years of experience in the field of policy and services for minority groups in higher education. So now you know about us, the speakers and the panelists, but I would also like to know, who are you? Dominique, can you please open the poll? So now we invite all participants to join our Zoom poll. We want to know, who are you? Normally, a screen should open now on your screen, and you can vote in the poll and let us know if you are a higher education institution representative, someone from a national agency, from a ministry, a student, or someone else. I'll give you some time to fill out the poll, and Dominique will tell us when we are ready.
Yes, I see answers still coming in.
Okay.
And it's slowing down now. Okay, we share the result now.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we have 46% higher education institutions, 13% people coming from a national agency, 3% from a ministry, and also 8% of students and 11% others. Now, this is interesting. We would like to know where you're from. So maybe people who voted for other, maybe you can let us know through the chat from which kind of organization you are. That's quite interesting for us to know. So please, if you can share. Thank you. Okay, so also national organizations, students union. We see a lot of answers coming in. And also a lot of higher education institutions, Q&A. Okay, very interesting. Thank you for that. Now we, at this moment, we still have a second question for you. Let us go to the second poll. What are, in your opinion, the most difficult aspects regarding a mobility abroad for a student with a disability? And you can click on multiple options there. So we'll leave you some time to fill it out. So the first one is the lack of motivation of students with disabilities, finding accurate information about the accessibility and support services at the host university or host city or host organization, knowing how to support the student, finding the right financial support for the student, and the last option is, I don't really know because I've never been involved in such mobility. So please, we are waiting for your votes. Are we almost there, Dominique?
Yes, some people are still voting, but it's still coming in. Let's give it 5 more seconds.
Perfect.
And then I will share the results. Okay, it's slowing down now. Share the results.
Okay, so the winner is finding accurate information about the accessibility and support services in the host university and city. This is an interesting one. I'm sure that Dominique and Valerie will also touch upon this when they present the study and the further deliverables of this project, because we are working on this topic. And then on the second place, we see knowing how to support the students. So also there, we in our projects, we are working on a communication package that will hopefully also guide and help and give tools to higher education institutions on how to support their students. Then on the third place, we have the lack of motivation of students. The fourth one is finding the right financial support for the student. And also 20% doesn't really know because they have not been involved in such a mobility. Okay, and we also see some other comments coming in the chat. So this is quite interesting, I guess. So, okay, now you know about us. Now we know a bit more about all of you. So let us now see what the results are of the research that has been undertaken within the ACFIME project. And I invite Dominique and Valerie to take the floor now.
Okay, thank you, Magali, for the nice introduction and to bringing us to the topic of the research that both Dominique and myself, in cooperation with the EPFIME team, have done. And we are very pleased to present the key findings of these results. If we go to the next slide, you will see that our presentation will touch upon the methodology that we have used for this study, the definition that we have used, and we will highlight some research results by touching up on testimonials, key findings, good practices, and also on policy recommendations. And also we would like to focus on the next steps that we will take in this inclusive mobility project. So the aim of, as Magali told, the aim of this project was to examine in depth the needs of students with disabilities, higher education institutions, and ministries of education across the European higher education area on the topic of inclusion, inclusive mobility for students specifically with disabilities. As you can see, we reached out to a large sample of students with disability. More than 1,134 students with disability from more than 30 countries took part, and we were also happy to see that all types of disabilities are represented in our sample. We also reached out to 114 universities from 22 countries, and we were also happy to have 23 ministries from 22 countries that participated also in responding to our questionnaire about the challenges and enablers on inclusive mobility for students with disabilities. Furthermore, we also focused on a focus group with some students with disabilities and experts in the field of inclusive mobility. And we also did some desk research on the topic of inclusive mobility. If we go to the next slides, we took as definition the definition that was made by the Inclusive Mobility Alliance, where Magali was talking about and which Dominique is currently chairing. For us, it's important to know that inclusive mobility means creating and ensuring good conditions to learn, work, or volunteer abroad for people with fewer opportunities by addressing their diverse support needs. So very important for us as EPFIME Consortium, we focus on a needs-based approach on what students with disabilities need to ensure a safe and exciting mobility period abroad. So that was also the definition that was mentioned in the questionnaires for each of the stakeholders. Based on those surveys, we have analyzed them in depth. We have now made a research report in which we report on each question of the questionnaire. And we also took the main findings in a policy booklet of recommendation and good practices. So in the research report, you will have all the research results. We invite you to read it as well. And in the policy booklet, you can see more recommendations, good practices, and some key testimonials of students with disabilities, but also of higher education institutions and ministry representatives. That's a bit the approach that we took in the research, and Dominique will now start with why an aim for inclusive mobility. Go ahead, Dom.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone from my side as well. Before we start looking in details at the results of our research, let's go with some general information and some generalities. Why should we aim for inclusive mobility? One thing we have found through our research that we were expecting to find, but we have data now to back it, that like any of our students with disabilities actually want to go on a mobility abroad. They want to take part in mobility programs. And all types of disabilities are represented in this sample. I will get back to that in a minute, more in details, but also what we have found also for our surveys is that the main motivators to go abroad on a mobility are very similar to over students, such as the opportunity to live abroad, the possibility to improve the career prospects, or to expand the social network of the students. So to back the first two claims that I just made, here are some hardcore results. We asked the students who answered our survey if they had a mobility experience. 22% of the students said they did go abroad for their studies or for a traineeship. 37% did not yet go abroad but are not interested. And 41% did not go abroad.
Dominique?
But yes?
Can you please slow down?
Am I going too fast? All right, I'm going to slow down.
You're saying a lot of numbers and no one's going to be able to follow. If you please just take a breath, that would be
all right.
Thank you.
All right, I will slow down a little bit, and I will just sum it up, saying 41% and 22%. That's 63% in total of students who either have been abroad already for their studies or for a traineeship, or are planning to go abroad. That's quite a lot of students who are either been abroad or planning to go abroad. In our sample, we have all type of disabilities represented, as you can see on the graph on the right side, from dyslexia, chronic illness, and physical disability to ADHD, autism, etc. And the majority of students who have been abroad have declared having a dyslexia, chronic illness, or physical disability. When we put this in perspective with the official data from the European Commission and the Erasmus program, we see that it's quite interesting, the reciprocity between the two. Students who have used the special needs support from the European Commission are at the moment between 0.11 and 0.15% of all the Erasmus students who have received the special needs support. And that's very little, and it has been quite stable along the past years. Since 2009-10, it's been at the same rate, and it's still more or less at the same level. So now for the actual results of our report, we have divided the results in 6 different areas, let's say. The first one is inclusion and mobility strategies. Then we have information provision and promotion of mobility. Then we have grants, funding and application, support services, student life, and awareness and cooperation. We will go through all of them using the following scheme. We have always a testimonial first from a respondent, then a key finding, then a good practice identified, and some key recommendations. And Valérie will start with the first one.
Okay, so the first area we identified was inclusion in the mobility strategies. And here you see a quote of one of the Ministry of Education representatives mentioning that there's a lack of quantitative and qualitative targets in the national policies on participation of students with disabilities, and also some proper data management tools. So this indicates already the key findings that we will will present on the next slide. Is that you can see that at European level, we have seen that only 14% of the ministries of education have mobility targets for students with disabilities. And also at institutional level, you see that only 32% of higher education institutions indicate that they have something mentioned about inclusive mobility in their institutional strategic plan on internationalization. So that highlights again that we are a little bit at the starting base of inclusion in mobility strategies. On the next slide, you can see for example, that the definitions are very varied about the countries, and that inclusion measures and targets to ensure social inclusion and mobility towards students with disabilities are rarely existent, both at a country level, but also at an institutional level. So that means that a lot of work still has to be done on the topic of inclusive mobility, but also the highlight that there is all work done. So it's important to focus now step by step on progressions on that. In the next slide, you see, for example, an example of one of our Flemish universities of applied sciences, VIVIS, situated in Bruges and Kortrijk. There you see that they already have an internationalization strategic plan that addresses inclusion and ensures even necessary structures so that all students, but also staff, can gain an international experience by removing all possible barriers. So they are focusing on financial, physical, mental barriers that students or staff may encounter. And they are also engaged to offer qualitative support before, during, and after the mobility. So that's a very good approach, a very sustainable approach. And that's also highlighted both in the research report, and you will find more about it in the policy booklet and good practice booklet. Furthermore, if we see some of the recommendation in that field, we think that's important that higher education and national authority should focus on inclusion strategies in their internationalization strategies, and also collect information about the participation of students with disabilities. And we noticed that setting targets and monitoring the participation in different mobility programs, we now saw that most institutions and countries focus only on Erasmus participation, but we have seen that students with disabilities also participate in other mobility programs. So it's important to monitor the situation and have an overall picture on comprehensive monitoring of the participation of students with disabilities. We will not highlight all the recommendations because otherwise we will not have enough time to also go in discussion about the results. But Dominique will now focus on information provision and promotion.
Yes, when it comes to the second area, information provision and promotion, we have some quotes from our student respondents. One of them says, "I have not heard of any information about an Erasmus program for disabled students." And another student said, "Most of the information on foreign exchange programs was given via public talks without captioning, interpreters, video recording." And questions are generally taken verbally over the phone. So this is inaccessible for me as a deaf person. When we look at the results from the different surveys, from the ministry survey, from the country surveys, we have asked if specific information was provided for students with disabilities. And more or less half of the countries surveyed at the moment provide such information for students with disabilities about going abroad. And when we look more in details about which country are actively encouraging the student to go abroad or actively encouraging the student to come to their country, we see that only 21% of the countries are actively encouraging their students with disabilities to go abroad. And a very interesting result is that 0% of the countries are at the moment trying to attract to their countries students with disabilities. So there's no initiative taken on that side, which can be one of the issues to be tackled. At the institutional level for higher education institution, we asked also how do they provide information for going abroad on mobility, and we see that we have very little universities that actually at the moment provide information with, for example, subtitles or videos in sign language or brochures in Braille. This is respectively 5% and 2% of them only. So in the main key findings that we have is that information provision and mobility abroad for students with disabilities is lacking. The campaigns to promote mobility are limited and do not reach students with disabilities. One of the good practices we found, though, comes from Greece. The National Agency for Erasmus Plus in Greece gives priority, instruct their higher education institution to give priority to students with special needs whenever this is possible. And they have also created and published leaflets in Braille language for their institutions. And we believe that this is a good practice that could be streamlined a little bit more. When we look at the recommendation we have made, higher education institutions and national authorities should promote the added value of mobility to students with disabilities and use especially targeted campaigns with inclusive resources. For example, sign language videos with subtitles, brochures in Braille, easy to read documents, and so on and so forth. Valerie, you can take over the next one.
Yes, thank you, Dominique. When we look at the topic of funding, grants and applications, we see that a great barrier for institutions, higher education institutions, is the limitation of funds, which make it difficult to cater the needs for students with disabilities. So higher education institutions are referring to Erasmus Plus as a good example of reimbursing access needs, but in other national programs, there's often no additional funding for the access needs of students with disability. And also a remark of higher education institutions across Europe is that some forms of financial support, example, sign interpreters, pedagogical help, that it in principle can be deployed abroad, but that some regulations are very complicated. And so there's a lot of administrative work on the topic of administration, what means that yes, some higher education institutions even do not do the effort or can't inform students in a right way. So that's an important barrier mentioned by higher education institutions, but also by ministry representatives and also by students with disabilities. So if we look at the next slide, we see that about 67% of the ministries of education provide additional specific mobility grants and support for students with disabilities going abroad, but that still 33% do not offer additional specific mobility grants. And also important is that half of the countries, more or less, indicate that national grants and support services are transportable abroad, but that means also that a lot of support services and grants are not transferable abroad, which means that this hinders students with disabilities to go abroad and to take the opportunity to study or go abroad. So that's an important topic that was mentioned also by different stakeholders and that we clearly see now also in the results of this survey. If you look at the next slide and the key findings that we have, the biggest lack is the transportability of grants and support systems. So it's really hindering the participation of students with disabilities in a mobility abroad program. So that's an important topic that has to be mentioned, but also we have found good practices. Some countries are really taking initiatives to also prepare students to go abroad by preparatory visits, and these are valued as extremely helpful for students with disabilities, but also for the home institutions. We have seen that institutions testified of how this help could reassure them to take care and to organize all the support for the students abroad. If we look at the next slides, we see, for example, the good practice of our national agencies, EPOS in Flanders. They have really developed an easy funding application process for the preparatory visits. So it allows students in an easy way and higher education institutions to ask for a preparatory visit. And also what's good in the procedure of EPOS is that a trusted person from the institutions or even a family member can also go abroad with the student on this preparatory visit. So that makes that everything can be clarified well in advance about the reasonable adjustments and the support that will be offered abroad. So that's mentioned also as a good practice in the booklet. I think, Dominique, you can go now to the next topic as well on areas of identified on support services.
All right. When it comes to support services, one of the testimonies we have gathered from the respondent consumer students, when I requested information, I was sent to various departments who failed to offer help or support. The responsible person in the International Mobility Office did not have supplemental information regarding the international mobility of people with disabilities, so we discovered things concerning my period abroad together. So that's a little bit what we have seen in general in our surveys is that there's a little bit of lack of information sometimes for international officers to know exactly how to support the students. When we asked the students about the topic of disclosing their disability to their institutions, we asked them if they have disclosed their disability to the institutions. 32% have disclosed their disability only to their home institution, so to the institution where they're usually studying, which means that they haven't told their host university to which they were going on mobility that they had any type of disability or any type of support needs. This is of course problematic, because if the university doesn't know that the student has specific needs to be addressed, maybe they cannot provide this this need, this support. When we asked the reason for which they did not disclose a disability, it was quite surprising to find that 39% of the students were just not asked. As simple as that. They were not asked by the institution, and then they didn't disclose the disability. 34% didn't believe it was important either. So that's also quite interesting to note down, and 25% didn't want to be labeled. When we asked to the universities, institutions, if they have specific administration procedures in place for mobility of students with disabilities, only 41% at the moment do have such procedures in place. So one of the main key findings here is that higher education institutions do not automatically acknowledge the disability status, as well as the reasonable adjustment that come with it that could be offered. But as we saw just before, maybe it's also because the disclosing of the disability doesn't happen all the time in an automatic way, automated way. A good practice for this part comes from the Université de Lorraine in France, where they put in the Erasmus Plus institutional agreement that they sign with their partners. They mentioned explicitly the engagement of the university and the capacity to welcome incoming students with disabilities. So that's quite an important step, and when we also believe here that this is a good practice. One of the recommendations that we put forward in our report is the need for creating a needs assessment procedure. So having a clear needs assessment carried out by the institution before the application of the students, and creating together with the students a support mobility plan. So if the student agrees that this is of course needed for them. And this is something that would help a lot with the transfer of support services from one university to another university. Valerie goes next for the student life. Your microphone is off, Valerie. Valerie, your microphone is off. You need to turn it on.
Yeah, okay. Regarding student life, we have also focused on asking students and higher education institutions what are the barriers in student life when you go abroad. And we found also good practices. There were students testifying that student housing is sometimes very well arranged. For example, you see here my student dorm is managed by the Office of Equal Opportunities, which make that I also have specialized support where I need in my student life and daily life. So that's an example of a good practice. But when we look also at the key findings and the results, we can see on the next slide that students really point out to a lack of available information regarding the accessibility of the destination, transport, housing, and the campus. So students really need more information and testify that the institutions should inform them more about those opportunities, also the best places to go socially. So also they support to more support in everyday life necessities, such as medical support, cooking when they are at their student house. So that's really an attention point that we have seen, although they are rather satisfied with student housing, that they lack some support in social life, in student life, and in everyday life necessities. Okay, if we look at the next slide, we see also very good practice of the University of Trento, where the Erasmus Student Network is very active. So the university there is cooperating with ESN to welcome and integrate their incoming students with disabilities. And this cooperation focused mostly on organizing campus tours with the international students, but also for searching buddies to support the students with disabilities to overcome their everyday challenges. So it was valued a lot as a good practice by many universities. So big applause for ESN, who is also represented here in the webinar for the good job they are doing to support the students also in students' life. When we look further at the recommendations, and I saw it also that it's very important that higher education institutions should provide more information on the accessibility of the destination, transport, housing, and campus, instead of only focusing on the reasonable adjustments in academic life. When we look also further, we see also that it's important to take initiatives when student support, peer support, and support in assisted living initiatives, where ESN, for example, also can take a role. And then I think, Dominique, we can go to the next area of barriers.
Yes. So for awareness and cooperation, which is the last area, one Ministry of Education representative told us that specific barriers could be also the lack of translator to a particular sign language, or the lack of coordinators for student support, for example, disability or inclusion offices at the university. So the improvement of cooperation between the support coordinator and the international officers is very crucial here. It might be challenging sometimes, but it is crucial. So so yes, one of the key findings is basically this this testimony that we just saw, that communication collaboration between the different services at the university, but also maybe outside the university, working with NGOs, are definitely something to be tackled. Good practice comes from Ireland, where the Higher Education Authority organizes audits and monitoring visits in the different universities in the country. And they actively engage also with the disability officers based in the universities to make sure that they know a little bit about the opportunities available to students with disabilities to take part, for example, in Erasmus Plus in this case, and also the support that comes with it. One of our recommendations here is that a broad dialogue and collaboration between different services needs to take place, and necessary structures need to be put into place, defining the roles of each of the services, defining clear roles, and supporting the student as much as possible, of course, is important. So you will find those recommendations, but many more as well. We have extracted only a couple of them here for today in our reports that we will publish. We are publishing now today, and we will tell you at the end of this webinar also the link to access them. Valérie, you go on for the next steps.
Yes. Okay, so briefly also the next step that we will take with this inclusive mobility project. If you look at the next slide, we will make more outputs in this project. Can you go, Dominique, to the next slide? Yeah. Okay. So I think Magali already touched a little bit. What are we doing now with all the results? We have constructed a framework on objectives for each stakeholder for higher education institution, national agencies and ministries of education on the different areas that we have identified in this project. So we have set for each area some quality standards and objectives that institutions should reach to install a sustainable inclusive mobility strategy at institutional or national level. And those objectives are also related to some action points. If you don't really reach already that objective on action points that you could undertake to improve and reach out that objective. So you will see that the framework is a digital framework, so it will be easy for each stakeholder to navigate through the framework and explore the different strategies and objectives that are important to reach out to install an inclusive mobility. But to support each stakeholder, we are also developing a self-assessment tool. And that's a questionnaire for each of the stakeholders. So higher education institution, national agencies and Ministry of Education will each have a questionnaire focusing on the objectives. And so they can go through a questionnaire with questions on does your institution already has the support from leadership, for example. So it's a very easy assessment that each stakeholders can go through. And after that assessment, you receive some feedback on how far are you already in the different areas and which action points could you undertake to improve your strategy. We will also develop in that framework also a toolbox with some resources that could support you to undertake the action and reach out to install that objective on inclusive mobility. But more important as well is the great work that ESN is doing also in cooperation with the Support Center for Inclusive Higher Education. And as Magali mentioned, it's more the topic of where Dominique is working on. That's the platform of inclusivemobility.eu. And that's a platform where all the information about inclusive mobility will be gathered. And you see here a screenshot of the preliminary website in which there will be actions for institutions for higher education, but also for countries, so for national agencies and ministries of education. And each stakeholder will be able to register in its institutional page the inclusion measures that it's undertake, the support services offered, and so on, and also the national policies on inclusion. So we think that that will bring clarity on the need of information that each stakeholder needs on the topic of inclusive mobility. It will also contain information about the cities and so on. So to give you an impression on the next step, the framework, the self-assessment tool, and the guideline that our partners in Ireland ahead are also making to install the action points at institutional level for higher education institutions, and the platform inclusivemobility.eu will be launched in March, April on a final conference of the EPFIME project. As Magali mentioned, we are also focusing on the PLA for SIM project. And in that project, we build further on the needs detected in the EPFIME project. And we will elaborate the framework, the self-assessment tool to the large inclusion setting of more disadvantaged students. We will there also elaborate a database in inclusivemobility.eu on national inclusion measures for more stakeholders and more disadvantaged backgrounds. And we will also develop a communication and training package to train the different stakeholders to organize more inclusive mobilities. At Flemish level, we will also organize international staff trainings with the colleagues of Artevelde University of Applied Sciences. We will reach out in 2021 with international staff trainings, where we will integrate also the resources that we have made in those projects. And also important, it's important to mention, we are now focusing on inclusive mobility, but in the framework, we will also highlight that it's really important that inclusive mobility should be seen in a broad vision of inclusion in universities. So it's really important to focus on a whole holistic approach on inclusion. And with SIGO, we are happy to inform you that we are launching next month also a series of webinars on inclusive universities, and international classes will be one of the topics of inclusive universities. So on the website, our colleague Emma published it on the website. You can find more about the initiatives, and you can already register for the webinars on inclusive universities. You can stay tuned through the website of SIGO also on the newsletter that you can subscribe to, where you will be updated on all the projects of inclusive mobility and also on the Inclusive Universities webinar. You can reach out also through email, but you can also have all the updated information on the project site now on inclusivemobility.eu. So that's, I think, a pleasure. We will also publish there the recording of today and also publish the reports on our website, but also ESN will make that it's updated also on the website inclusivemobility.eu. So that are the next steps that we would appreciate to stay connected with all of you on this important topic. That's, I think, in a nutshell, the main findings.
Thank you very much, Valerie and Dominique. So let us move over to a round of reactions from our panel to these results. And first, I would like to give the floor to Elena. From a European level, what do you think is the most striking result or outcome from this research to you? And are there still things that can be done to improve the current situation?
Yes, thanks a lot, Magali, and hello to everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and the work you are doing with your partners in the framework of this project is just amazing. What you have here in terms of the results from the survey that you have conducted is a gold mine. There are many very interesting results. I picked up a few of them. Notably the difference between the countries and the institutions when it comes to inclusion in mobilities. We saw that only 14% of the countries have that inclusion in terms of mobility strategies, whereas that number is higher for the universities. It is 32%, it is better, but still we think that from the European perspective we can do better, and this is why in the next program we will be supporting universities to really put inclusion at the center of their mobilities, and this we are going to do through different ways. Firstly, we have reinforced the principle of inclusion and including students with disabilities and with special needs within the next Erasmus Charter for Higher Education. And then we will also be having a specific strategy for diversity and inclusion within the next program, which will help us collectively have a similar terminology when it comes to inclusion, to what we exactly mean by students with special needs, students with disabilities. This is why we are also broadening this definition in the next program. And then we are also going to include in this inclusion and diversity strategy the promotion of good practices, and we already saw some of them during your presentation. And these are, for example, having inclusion officers at higher education institutions, but also fostering a better communication and cooperation between international offices and disability offices in order to make this information for the students with disabilities easier to access. We saw also in the results of your study that this was still an obstacle. And finally, we are also promoting a better visibility and promotion mobility of students, and helping universities to really have maybe clearer strategies or more straightforward strategies really to reach those kind of students.
Thank you, Elena. It looks very promising. I know that you have to leave at 3 o'clock. So one last question for you. What is maybe the most inspiring good practice that you heard in the presentations?
An inspiring practice that I liked very much is the one from the University of Lorraine, where they included actually in their interinstitutional agreement really information on how they are supporting students with disabilities. I would like to link this also to the future interinstitutional agreements that we are setting up for the next program, where we will have a specific dedicated field for universities to inform and to indicate whether they have specific infrastructure, specific support services for students with disabilities. And this will then also be visible through the Erasmus Plus app to the future Erasmus students, where they will be able to see in a very visible and easy to access way which universities are having specific infrastructure and support services, so that they can also make an informed decision when they are selecting which university they want to do their mobility in.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it would be very interesting also to link this information then to the inclusive mobility platform that we are producing now within the project.
Yes, absolutely. And then if I can just mention also the support that we are going to be putting in place in terms of funding. So here we will provide more support for universities to really put in place a structured mobility, let's say, for students with special needs. So universities will be receiving an additional top-up for the organizational support when they are organizing a mobility for a student with disabilities or with special needs. This is also for us a way to give, if you want, more incentives to universities to really develop this kind of support for their students with special needs. And then we are also going to increase in parallel the top-up for students with special needs. So even though we see that the funding is not the main obstacle, however, it is an important element to have in mind. So we are putting in place, as you see, parallel ways and parallel concrete elements to really make the inclusion, to put the inclusion at the heart of the future program, and to really collectively have this inclusion becoming, if you want, the soul of the next Erasmus program. It's really absolutely important for us.
Thank you very much, Elena. Sounds all very promising, and we hope that we will be able to collaborate and complement to the new activities and actions that you are taking, and from our side within the projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
now,
Magali.
Let's move. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Now from European level, let's go to national level, and I would like to ask to Els Titica, what did you find out today that you were not expecting? What's the most striking outcome from your side? Els, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
You can hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Good. So what I was saying, there still is a lack of awareness about the barriers students face and room for improvement in the communication and collaboration between different stakeholders, both inside and between organizations. So I am happy that this project have found place, and that there will be a booklet of policy recommendations and good practices, as well as that a framework, self-assessment and guidelines on how to install a sustainable strategy and cooperation for the different stakeholders will be developed. It is important that we keep on working together and focus on open communication.
I think Magali has had a technical issue. She's coming back.
Okay.
Yes, she's back now.
Sorry, I lost connection. Els?
Yeah, I think you can ask me the next question.
Okay, sorry about this. Yes, so I don't know what you answered, but what are the successes with regards to how the Flemish Ministry, the national agency, and the higher education institutions collaborate and work together in Belgian Flemish community?
So what is important is commitment. We have a clear commitment to develop an internationalization strategy in which inclusion is given a central place. And this strategy has been developed in dialogue and in cooperation between different stakeholders. Also, the students were involved. That's one of the great things that worked well in Flanders. But the strategy contains goals for 2020, so we will work on a new strategy for the future, where we will use the lessons learned and build on a new strategy. In the current programs, we installed the rule that at least 25% of the Flemish outward mobility grants have to be awarded to students from underrepresented groups. The implication is that in order to use the full budget that is available for mobility actions, there have to be enough applications from students from underrepresented groups. So the opportunities for all mobile students and the opportunities for students of underrepresented groups are connected with each other. This compels higher education institutions to identify these groups of students and encourage them to apply for a mobility grant. As this strategy has been in place since 2013, Flanders has generated 5 years of comparable data on this issue, which is fairly unique in the European higher education area. Statistics show that in the academic year 2018-2019, 22% of all initial mobile degrees are attributed to students from underrepresented groups. But using the focus on these targets is only one way to clear the path to an inclusive higher education area. In a fully inclusive higher education area, the need to register the students with and without disabilities would be less. Mobility would be something open for every student. So it is not only important to focus on policies, but also to learn institutions on how they can improve their practices and recommendations. In Flanders, we support higher education institutions to improve their institutional strategies through our support center for inclusive higher education. They developed a self-assessment tool and staff training for higher education institutions and have installed a learning network for inclusion and international officers where they can exchange on practices and challenges. This way, we support and enable staff to work professionally and equitably with a diverse student body and staff. We support them in creating inclusive learning environments and mobility experiences in which each student feels connected. This is essential, not only for mental well-being, but also for the study success and exchange opportunities of students. So yeah, I would say that those elements are quite crucial.
Thank you. And what do you still see as main challenges for Flanders? What can still be further improved?
As pointed in the research, the transportability of support services. At this moment, we missed information on how support services were organized abroad. So we are very happy with the platform that the IPFIME partners are developing. It is clear that all stakeholders miss a clear overview of transparent information. With the platform inclusivemobility.eu, we will be able to act more proactive and clear the path for all students to go abroad. And yeah, maybe I could tell you some more about the things I found out today that were not expected.
Yes, please.
So there were like 2 things actually. I learned that there are more and more countries who collect data, but the definition of disabilities is so scattered among different countries and even within countries that it is difficult to compare. Countries do not systematically collect data on the participation in mobility programs, and only 14% of the countries have set a target for the participation of students with disabilities in mobility programs. Although measuring is not the most important thing, I think it would be good if the different countries would use the same definitions. It would also help to recognize the disability status automatically. It is striking and disappointing to hear that universities do not automatically take over the disability status of incoming students, and that some students even have to undertake much efforts to provide the new documentation about their disability. And second, I learned that Although the satisfaction regarding student housings is rather positive, students point out the lack of available information regarding the accessibility of the destination, transport, housing, and campus, and the best places where to go socially. Students also point out to more support with everyday life necessities like medical support or cooking or something. And with the opportunities we have today, digitalization, internet, smartphones, this is quite unexpected for me. Making an app nowadays that makes housing opportunities visible is no rocket science. So I am wondering if the lack of information exists because the buildings of higher education institutions and the cities they are settled in are not so accessible. To change this, it will take some time and collaboration with also local governments. And I think architects are playing a crucial part. But still, it is important that higher education institutions are aware of those needs of students and provide them, where possible, the necessary information. The access guide of the KU Leuven, for example, is a good practice mentioned in the report. The guide is an online tool that gives information on physical accessibility of rooms and buildings of the KU Leuven. And the accessibility information is not only very supportive for students with disabilities, but the information is beneficial for all students and staff at KU Leuven. It is good that the platform inclusivemobility.eu that both SIHO and Erasmus Student Network are developing through this project will contain information about cities, transport, etc. This will be very supportive for all students. But in short term, the students can help other students the best with giving them information on the local way of life, good places to go, etc., and support them in their daily life. The European Student Network and Erasmus Student Network are both important partners in this challenge. For example, the ESN developed the Exchange Ability Project to make their organization accessible for students with disabilities to help remove obstacles to participation and exchange and promote the opportunities available. They also partnered up with two booking platforms, Uniplaces and Spot at Home, to provide international students and trainees with suitable housing options for their time abroad. Both platforms give information about accessibility. And earlier, we also heard the example of the University of Trento. Yeah.
Yes, well, thank you, Els. Thank you very much. You touched upon very important aspects, I think. Certainly, making sure that we need to collaborate more on national level between institutions, ministries, and all other stakeholder organizations, and including students, of course. But there's also work that is still to be done in collaboration with other countries. And I think we can certainly learn much more about about the other countries and the policies and the implementation that they have there in the other countries in Europe. So now I would like to go over and ask Valérie to focus more on, let's say, institutional level maybe. What recommendation do you still have for staff of higher education institutions who organize and who coordinate mobilities on a daily basis? How can they make mobility more inclusive?
I think one step will be in March that they can go to the self-assessment tool and look at in depth at their own context what would be good to improve. But what I learned from this research also at the Flemish level when we launched the surveys, it was a long survey. It was a survey mentioned focusing on regulations of disabilities and also focusing on regulations on internationalization. And what we saw, even at Flemish level, but also at European level, reported from other higher education institutions, we saw that the different departments did not connect enough. And it was for some institutions the first time that they came together to fill out a survey and to reflect on what are we doing on inclusion and mobility. So I think one of the important recommendations is to start with a broad dialogue at institutional level and to bring the different stakeholders together. In the guideline that our partner AHEAD is developing, there will be real concrete action points on how you can improve the cooperation at institutional level between departments. But I also liked the highlights that Els Titica mentioned, that it's important to focus on a whole institutional approach on inclusion in the university. So it's really important to bring the different stakeholders at institutional level together. And we will be happy to provide very concrete action points through the framework and self-assessment tool and the guideline. But the cooperation and awareness, as Els also mentioned, it was quite striking for me that all the parties are saying that. Not only the students with disabilities, but also higher education institutions, ministry representatives, and also national agencies who were often involved in answering the surveys together with the ministries of education.
Thank you very much, Valerie. And now I would like to go to Dominique with a question more related to the student level. Dominique, what recommendation or tips do you have for students with disabilities who are attending today or who would like to go studying or doing an internship abroad?
Thank you, Magali. Sorry, I was dealing with the spotlight as well. So what tips or recommendation I have for students with disabilities to go abroad, who want to go abroad? I think what we're trying to do with this webinar is to pass the message that mobility and international exchange is for everyone. And that means passing the message as well that this is also for you. So we are trying to pass this message. We hope to see that a little bit more in the future, done by all the stakeholders we mentioned today. But we hope that this message will pass a bit better. Also, maybe a concrete tip that I can give to students is that, first of all, believe that this is also for you. Second thing is contact your international officers at your university and inclusion officer as well. They can probably help you understand a little bit better what can be done for you to support you. And most importantly, I'm gonna preach for my own choir here. We are releasing a platform, inclusivemobility.eu, that will provide a lot of information about how to go abroad. This will be available, unfortunately, not yet. It will be available only in March, April next year. So March, April 2021. But check this platform and hopefully you will find a lot of information there about different universities, about different support services that universities offer, but maybe also support services offered by the country where you want to go in. You might be surprised by how many support services exist that are not often easily found, let's say. So check the platform. inclusivemobility.eu is I think the best tip we can give to students at the moment.
Thank you, Dominique. Sounds very promising. Now, as I see, there were not so many questions in the Q&A box up till now, and some has been answered already. So I suggest, Dominique, that we go into the Zoom polls with the audience now. Yes, there is the first one. So we would now also like to ask all participants to share their thoughts about the results of the survey of the research study that we presented today. Which result was the most striking for you? So first option is students with disabilities want to go abroad. Second one is the low number of countries or higher education institutions who have specific targets and measures. The low amount of inclusive communication methods used to promote mobility. The lack of transportability of grants and other support abroad, or any other issue that is not mentioned here. And then you can type this into the chat. So let's see what results this gives. Dominique, I wait for you to have the
Yes,
sign
now it's
that
slowing
polls are
down.
slowing.
I will stop it now and share the results.
Okay, so yes, the first place goes to the low number of countries and higher education institutions who have foreseen targets and measures for inclusion. So this is, yeah, this is really a message to people who are developing policy at national and institutional level, I think. Because as we have seen also from our side in Flanders, really putting targets there on national level, it really also inspired the higher education institutions to take further well, their efforts in trying to reach those benchmarks on one hand, and on the other hand, also create their own strategies on these topics. So it can really be a stimulus to have targets on national level. On the second place, we see the low amount of inclusive communication methods used to promote mobility. So as mentioned before, we will work in these projects on communication tools. So we will be able to help you further with that in the near future, I hope. And then we also see 15% for the lack of transportability of grants and supports abroad. And finally, students that want to go abroad, only 7%. So let's go to the second poll, Dominique. Yes, here we go. Who could do more? Which stakeholder do you think could or should do more to support students with disabilities to go abroad? And here we have multiple choice. National Ministries of Education, national agencies for Erasmus, European Commission. They promised already quite a few new actions. The higher education institutions themselves and student organizations.
So
which
people are still
stakeholders,
voting?
Yes, which stakeholders in your country need to do more?
Okay, it's slowing down now.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, higher education institutions is the most favorite one. So yes, the higher education institutions themselves, they need to do more. They need to take more measures, should support students better. Then we see on the second place the National Ministries of Education. So this is also a signal to policy level and followed quite closely by the national agencies for Erasmus Plus in the different countries. So it shows that, yeah, as already mentioned, also by the panelists, it's a combination of different stakeholders in the countries that have to work together to support the students with disabilities better and more in the future. So thank you very much for everyone for your activity here during the polls. We're almost at the end. And yes, today we have discovered what the situation is for students with disabilities to take part in mobility programs, also about their own willingness to go abroad and about the many barriers they face. We have also seen that professionals working in higher education, but also beyond, need to collaborate more closely, and that there are solutions and good practices out there. We will share those results, those good practices with all of you in the research report and in the booklet that will be shared on the website. And we think that those results and those good practices can also be easily replicated in other countries, that we can really learn from each other. So therefore, we hope that this webinar, our discussions, and the good practices shared have managed to give you some concrete inputs and especially also inspiration on how to tackle the topic of inclusive mobility for students with disabilities. Inclusion is also taken up as one of the main topics in the Rome communique that will be adopted by the Ministers of Education in the European higher education area on 19th of November, so in a few weeks. Ministers will commit to building an inclusive, innovative, and interconnected European higher education area by 2030, and be able to underpin a sustainable, cohesive, and peaceful Europe. Inclusion is mentioned there because every learner should have equitable access to higher education and should be fully supported in completing their studies and training, including being part of mobility programs. So we hope that the ongoing work in this and in other projects on inclusion will contribute both on policy, but also on implementation level within the European higher education area. And we would like to thank our guest speakers of today, Elena, Els, Dominique, and Valerie, very much. Thank you very much for your contributions and for taking part in our webinar. And thank you as well, our participants, for your active engagement and for the questions that came our way. We unfortunately could not answer all the questions mentioned in the chat, but we do hope that the release of the report and the booklet will help answer some of them. The documents will be available online from today onwards. And especially we would also like to help to thank our sign interpreters for being with us today, and also for the live captioning. We know that there has been some problems with this during the webinar. For us, it was also the first time that we tried out these tools during an online webinar, but despite the technical issues, we still hope that it was an added value for all of you. So please stay connected with us, join us for our final conference in April, at which we will launch the online platform, the self-assessment tool, and the guidelines, and feel free to contact us anytime if you have any questions that were not answered today. Thank you very much, all of you, and bye-bye.
you.